She saw a man hiding in that drain. She immediately called police.
What are you trying to climb out of the house for?
Guys, man, I see you pulling over people and all this crazy like this, man, and I ain't got time for this.
Houston police officers chasing that man running across Highway 249.
You know what she is, I know what she is, okay? Did you think she was a prostitute?
Yeah, I thought she might be.
The wild foot chases aren't just thrilling, they're packed with split-second decisions and jaw-dropping moments. In one memorable case, a suspect leaps from a second-story window, landing hard but still managing to run as officers close in behind him. How do suspects push their limits, and what drives officers to risk it all to catch them? Tune in as we explore the electrifying chases where time hangs by a thread. The chase that spun out of control. Take, for example, the scene where a suspect decides it's smart to bail out of a moving vehicle. The car's still rolling and this guy thinks he can just hop out and sprint away like some action hero. Meanwhile, the car ends up rolling into someone's yard, narrowly missing a couple of parked vehicles and eventually finding its new resting place against a tree. The kicker? The suspect was packing an AK, sitting comfortably in the back seat, as if that wasn't going to catch up to him. Honestly, what did he think was going to happen? Before we dive deeper, it's clear that this chase spiraled into chaos far beyond what anyone expected, and trust me, this is just the start of the shocking twists ahead. There's this certain kind of overconfidence that a lot of these runners have. It's like they think the rules of physics just don't apply to them.
Put your hands behind your back.
Ow!
Well, you shouldn't have run from us. You got anything in your pockets, bud?
Another guy, no license and definitely no common sense, decided he was going to bolt because, in his own words, everybody gets scared. Sure, everyone gets nervous when they see flashing lights, but most people don't decide to take off running, especially when they're already on house arrest with a tether around their ankle. But no, this guy crashes his car, hops out and runs, thinking he can outpace a whole crew of police cruisers. Spoiler alert, he couldn't. Now he's looking at a stack of charges as long as a grocery list. It's almost like they're doing their best to make things worse for themselves. And then there's the comedic twist, if you can call it that, of suspects who think they can hide in plain sight after running. One guy, let's call him Solomon, thought he could just stroll back casually after giving officers the slip. But here's the thing. When you've just led police on a chase, they're not likely to forget your face. And if you're hanging around near the same house you ran from, well, you're not exactly winning any awards for intelligence. When he finally got caught, he put up some protest about his knee, blaming old injuries and whatnot. But to the officers, it's just another day dealing with people who think a few old excuses will get them off the hook. Honestly, there's something almost fascinating about the logic these suspects use, or fail to use. One guy got pushed out of a stolen car during a chase, that's right, pushed out mid-chase, by his so-called friend who had picked him up. And what did this friend do next? He sped off, leaving his passenger rolling across the street. It's as if the suspect thought that abandoning his passenger would somehow improve his odds. Newsflash, tossing someone out of a moving car doesn't really do much for your credibility when you're caught with a stolen vehicle. Plus, the guy who got thrown out, he still covered for his buddy, trying to downplay what happened.
If maybe there's more of a reason he ran from the police other than he was just in a stolen car. Make sure he doesn't have a lab or he doesn't have any guns or anything like that in here.
Loyalty, I guess, even when it's really, really misplaced. But perhaps the real winners in the foot chase department are the suspects who run even when they know there's absolutely no way out. Take the guy who got up, tried to run, and promptly face-planted because, surprise, he was still in handcuffs. He actually thought he might have a chance to outrun the officers with his hands cuffed behind his back. If that doesn't scream desperation, I don't know what does. He even admitted afterward that running in cuffs was a bad idea, like some revelation just hit him after his face hit the pavement. Honestly, you can't make this stuff up. Then there's the whole business of hiding, which is always amusing. One suspect decided that after running through several backyards, hopping fences, and narrowly avoiding a few barking dogs, he'd simply lay down and play dead in someone's garden. Did he think the officers would just give up if they couldn't see him breathing? Or maybe he believed he could blend in with the scenery like a rogue garden gnome. Spoiler alert, they found him face down in the petunias, out of breath and out of options. The officers, of course, couldn't help but laugh at the whole thing. Sometimes the sheer absurdity of the situation is all you can do but laugh. In another bizarre incident, there's the guy with no valid license who decided that risking a high-speed chase was somehow better than pulling over and taking a ticket. It's like these suspects operate on opposite-day logic. Whatever makes the least sense is what they choose. This guy ends up careening through neighborhood streets, narrowly missing pedestrians, and eventually ends up in a ditch, his car completely done for. When they finally got to him, he had the nerve to laugh at how stupid the whole thing was. At least he was self-aware enough to realize how dumb the choice had been. A little too late, but hey, better than nothing. When the running stops, the things suspects say and do after getting caught can be just as shocking as the chase itself. Ridiculous excuses after the chase. The real irony is the way some of these suspects try to negotiate after they're caught. Take the guy who had an AK-47 and a couple of fired rounds missing from his magazine. He swore up and down that he hadn't fired it, that maybe somebody else had. He even tried to convince the officers that it was all a misunderstanding, despite the fact that the rifle was sitting in his back seat and matched the exact description given by the witnesses. It's like they think if they just deny everything enough times, the officers will eventually believe them. But when your gun's missing bullets and neighbors are pointing fingers, denial isn't exactly going to win anyone over. Some of these chases also have their moments of absolute comedy gold, though unintentionally, of course. One guy had warrants and decided he wasn't going to let a little thing like being handcuffed stop him from trying to escape. He wriggled, twisted, and somehow managed to get himself into an even worse situation by falling face first onto the pavement. When they asked him why he ran, he said something along the lines of, "I needed a cigarette." I mean, if you're going to run from the cops, at least have a better reason than a nicotine craving. You almost want to give him a point for honesty, but still, not exactly the smartest move. And then there's the suspect who runs straight back to his own house as if that's not going to be the first place officers look. He's out there trying to climb out a window to avoid the police in his front yard. It's like a bad sitcom, the kind of moment that makes you wonder if these guys have ever seen an episode of Cops before. The officers just stood there watching him struggle to get the window open until they decided they'd seen enough and took him down. It's hard to say what he thought was going to happen, that he'd make a clean getaway by ducking into his own house. One of the most bewildering parts of these chases is how they often end with the suspects acting like they're the ones who've been wronged. There was this one guy on the run who decided that after getting caught, he'd start complaining about the police being too rough with him. Mind you, this is after he jumped fences, ducked through people's backyards, and nearly caused a massive pileup by refusing to pull over. But suddenly, once he's in cuffs, he's the victim.
Where's the dope at?
They got it.
Then what did you run
Because
for?
I thought they was trying to set me up.
It's almost as if they forget why the officers are there in the first place, the choices they made that led up to that point. There's also something almost comical about how these chases can go from high-speed, adrenaline-fueled chaos to a complete standstill in the blink of an eye. One moment you've got a suspect tearing down a back alley, and the next he's sprawled out, wheezing, completely out of breath, just giving up. It's as if reality finally catches up and they realize they're not cut out for this kind of thing. Most of these guys aren't exactly Olympic sprinters. They're just average Joes who thought they could make a run for it and got a reality check instead. In the end, most of these foot chases end the same way, with a suspect in cuffs, sitting in the back of a cruiser, and a long list of new charges added to whatever trouble they were already in. It's almost like watching the same story play out over and over again, just with different characters. They think they can beat the system, that they can outsmart the officers, but in the end, they're just running themselves into deeper trouble. The real question isn't why they run, it's why they think running will work in the first place. And let's talk about the unpredictability of these moments, where suspects seem to pick the least logical escape routes. Take, for instance, a guy who thought the best way to lose pursuing officers was by running straight into a crowded park. You have families, kids playing, and this guy bolts right into the middle of it, thinking he's got the upper hand. The officers were right on his tail, and the crowd didn't do much to slow them down. The funniest part, he tried to act casual, blending in like he was just another jogger out for an afternoon run. But running in jeans and sneakers with a bunch of police behind you is kind of a dead giveaway. It was only a matter of time before they tackled him right in front of a group of stunned onlookers. The scene looked almost too absurd, like something out of a poorly scripted action movie. Once the chase ends, their hiding spots and desperate moves will leave you wondering how they thought any of it would work.
Be honest with me.
Me?
Yeah.
Give me some money, man.
I know. How are you going to make money?
I don't know.
Hiding in the worst places. Then there are those suspects who think hiding underwater is the ultimate solution. One man thought he could avoid arrest by jumping into a pond and holding his breath. There he was, completely submerged, while officers stood around the water watching the bubbles. This isn't an action movie where someone can stay underwater indefinitely. Eventually, he had to come up for air, and when he did, there was nothing but laughter from the officers. They pulled him out, soaking wet and shivering, and it was clear that his grand escape plan had not gone the way he envisioned. The only thing he got for his trouble was a ride to jail and some very wet clothes. The officers couldn't help but joke about how it was the worst game of hide-and-seek they'd ever seen. But let's not forget the suspects who just freeze, thinking maybe, just maybe, if they don't move, no one will see them. It's almost like they think they have the powers of a chameleon. In one memorable episode, a guy ran until he couldn't run anymore, then pressed himself against a wall, eyes closed, as if the officers wouldn't notice him. The officers spotted him immediately, and there was this moment of awkward silence before they burst out laughing. It's like watching a kid playing hide-and-seek who hides in plain sight and genuinely believes they found the best spot ever. The officers had a hard time keeping a straight face while they cuffed him. He didn't even protest, just shrugged and said he was hoping for the best. Sometimes it's not just about running from the police, but what suspects do while they're running. One guy had the brilliant idea to try and stash his contraband during the chase. He was tossing items left and right out of his pockets, from his waistband, thinking this would somehow lessen his charges. The problem was, the officers were watching the whole time, and they simply followed the trail of evidence he left behind. By the time they caught up to him, all they had to do was walk back along his escape route and pick up everything he'd tossed. It was like breadcrumbs leading right back to all his illegal possessions, and when they confronted him, he actually tried to claim that none of it was his. Apparently, someone else must have been running along the same path, throwing out identical items. The officers weren't buying it, and neither did the judge later. Another favorite tactic seems to be hiding in the most uncomfortable places imaginable. One suspect thought the best hiding spot would be inside a trash can. He climbed in, crouched down, and pulled the lid over himself, probably thinking he was being incredibly clever. But trash cans aren't exactly soundproof, and when officers got close, they could hear the unmistakable rustling and shifting of someone trying to stay hidden. They tipped the can over, and out he spilled, covered in garbage and looking more than a little embarrassed. The officers couldn't resist a few jokes about him taking himself out, and the whole scene was just another reminder that desperation makes people do some incredibly foolish things.
I seen you running back there when you said you had him. I was out here.
He came right.
I never saw him.
He's in here somewhere. He's underneath this truck. Half these trucks are unlocked.
One of the most laughable moments happened when a suspect tried to hide by disguising himself in plain sight, and in his attempt to evade officers, he ducked into a convenience store. What did he do next? He grabbed a blue jacket off one of the racks, put it on over his hoodie, and continued browsing the aisles like he was just another shopper. But the bright red hood was still hanging out, and the officers spotted him almost immediately. When they approached, he tried to argue that he wasn't the guy they were looking for. The officers couldn't help but point out the glaringly obvious bright red hood sticking out of his makeshift disguise. It was one of those moments that makes you shake your head. Did he really think a quick wardrobe change would make a difference? And let's not forget the moments where suspects try to use innocent bystanders as a shield. One suspect ran straight into a group of people waiting at a bus stop and tried to blend in by standing perfectly still among them. He probably thought the officers wouldn't risk approaching with so many civilians around, but the crowd was more confused than helpful. The officers moved in, and the people at the bus stop quickly stepped aside, leaving the suspect standing there awkwardly, hands in his pockets, trying not to make eye contact. It was a painfully awkward moment, and when they took him into custody, one of the bystanders couldn't help but ask, "Did he really think that would work?" It's a question that comes up a lot in these chases. What exactly were they thinking? From risky stunts to wild choices, these escapes show how strange and unexpected things can really get. The risk that wasn't worth it. There was also the guy who tried to run across a highway. He thought that if he made it to the other side, he'd somehow be in the clear. But running across a highway is not just dangerous, it's incredibly stupid. Cars were honking, slamming on brakes, swerving to avoid him, and all the while the officers were waiting on the shoulder, watching his every move. He made it about halfway before realizing he was trapped between lanes of speeding cars with nowhere to go. The officers eventually had to help stop traffic just to get him off the road. It's a miracle he wasn't hit, and when they finally got him in cuffs, they couldn't help but point out how ridiculous the whole stunt had been. He risked his life for what? To avoid a traffic ticket and some warrants? It's hard to feel sympathy when someone makes choices that reckless. And then there are the repeat runners, the ones who never seem to learn their lesson. One guy, known to local officers for his habit of running every single time they tried to pull him over, had racked up quite the reputation. It became almost a running joke among the officers, no pun intended, that they'd see him and just prepare for a chase. His last attempt was the most memorable. He took off on foot after crashing his car into a ditch, but instead of heading for the trees or trying to find a hiding spot, he ran straight into an open field. It was broad daylight, no cover in sight, just him and a whole lot of empty space. The officers simply watched as he ran out of steam, slowed to a stop, and eventually just sat down, completely exhausted. It was as if he finally realized there was nowhere to go. When they caught up to him, he just shrugged and said, "Thought I had it this time."
Yeah, we first saw him in the stream right here, and he's swimming away, just casually walking / swimming away from him, and I go, "Dude, just stop, just give it up." And he's like, "No, leave me alone." I get to the water, and he's on the other side, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm getting wet today.
Sometimes the sheer stubbornness of these suspects is what stands out the most. One guy tried to argue his way out of being caught even as he was being put into the back of a police car. He kept insisting that he hadn't done anything wrong, despite having led officers on a multi-mile chase through residential neighborhoods. His argument? He was just taking a drive and didn't notice the flashing lights behind him. The officers weren't buying it, especially since he'd run several stop signs, jumped a curb, and nearly hit a pedestrian in his so-called drive. Even when faced with overwhelming evidence, he wouldn't back down. It's like they believe if they keep denying it, somehow it will all go away. And then there was the guy who thought he could outrun a police dog. He took off into the woods, thinking he'd be able to lose the officers among the trees. What he didn't count on was the K9 unit being right behind them. The dog tracked him with ease, and within minutes the officers were following the sound of barking to find the suspect treed, literally. He had climbed up a tree in an attempt to escape the dog, but there he was, perched on a branch, looking down at the officers below. They had to coax him down, all while trying not to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. It's not every day you see someone treating a police chase like a game of hide and seek in the woods. There's also the suspect who, after running out of steam, decided that hiding inside a porta potty was his best option. He slipped in, locked the door, and tried to stay quiet. But porta potties are not exactly inconspicuous, especially when they're the only structure in an open field. The officer spotted it immediately and could hear him moving around inside. They knocked, and when he didn't come out, they simply tipped it over. He came out covered in blue chemicals, his pride clearly hurt more than anything else. It was a fitting end to a ridiculous attempt at evading arrest. The sheer desperation in some of these chases is almost unbelievable. One suspect tried to hide in a storm drain, thinking he could crawl his way to freedom. He managed to get into the drain, but it wasn't long before he realized he was stuck. The pipes were too narrow and he couldn't move forward or backward. The officers had to call in rescue to get him out, and by the time they did, he was covered in grime and clearly regretting his choice. It was one of those moments where you have to wonder what was going through his head when he decided that crawling into a storm drain was the best plan. In the end, these chases are a mix of the dangerous, the absurd, and the downright foolish. Suspects run because they think they can get away, but more often than not, they just end up making things worse for themselves. They hide in ridiculous places, come up with terrible excuses, and sometimes seem to forget that the officers chasing them are trained for exactly this kind of situation. It's a game of cat and mouse, but the mouse is almost always outmatched. Whether it's hiding in a trash can, trying to blend in at a bus stop, or running straight into a dead-end alley, the result is usually the same: a pair of handcuffs and a ride to the station. Are wild foot chases just adrenaline-filled TV moments, or do they reveal deeper flaws in how suspects and law enforcement interact? Share your thoughts and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.